Hi, I'm an artist and I'm an art teacher, and my favorite people to teach are freshmen because for them it's always new. And even though I've looked at it for, 35 years, I'm like, whoo, yes, that is very exciting. So I get to see it again, right? I'm going to be talking about, I think of myself as a leech when it comes to finding when people discover something and it's really cool and they get really excited about it, like I'm leeching off of that excitement that they're having, right? Okay, so this is my drawing. And often you hear artists say things like, I want the art to speak for itself, which most people reject, especially curators, in my opinion, and art writers. And the problem with art speaking for itself is not that it cannot speak, art speaks all the time. It's that most people who are looking at it don't know how to speak in pictures, right? And so my talk today is about how pictures themselves are their own semantic language, and that what I'm doing for you guys is putting it into words, how I use pictures to talk to other pictures. Oh, okay. So this is my picture. It's 10 inch by 12.5 inches. I'm going to talk about the process and how it was made. But one of the things you need to know first is Meliagara, which is a room in Pompeii. So first century Rome is where we're going on that. Okay. A couple of things. I love this sort of shorthand, like little word plus, bottom line to talk about which word we're talking about. So I like the idea of rooting and sowing, because you're planting things, but also it's what pigs do when they're looking for something interesting. And so I was kind of going more for the pig thing. So this might be the sum total of the papers that I read that this institute puts out. So sorry, I'm like short on these things. Alan Walker Reed's 1983 paper and et cetera, that no word has the same meaning twice. And I'm going to throw out the word word and use the word logos or semantikos. So instead of talking about words, I'm going to say that no image has the same meaning twice. I also love Mart Levinson's extensional and visual divisive dating words, because for me, like, that's a visual cue, and I love visual cues. And I also like the map is not the territory, because that's kind of perfect for pictures, right? That's what pictures are about. So ancient Rome, I spend a lot of time thinking about Italian art, and I spend a lot of time enjoying looking at Rome. And that is definitely a place where the map and the terrain are very wrong. So Rome of 2022 is built on Rome of 79 CE, is built on Rome of, 1,000 years earlier. But that's where I started thinking about perceptual and visual and dimensional confusion of map and territory. I like the word confundo because it could mean melt or it could mean fuse. And that dimensional mapping problem, if you add that to the semantics of architecture, goes someplace really interesting. So if you think about volcanoes, those things like to fuse architecture together, poor Pompeii, but it is a really good archive for fourth period Roman painting. Fourth period Roman painting is what they were doing in the first century. Okay, so this is a visual semantics conversation. I'm using symbolic conventions of space, and they're graphically represented in 2D. And the two conventions that I'm using are Pompeii, House of Meliagara, and Escher's cycle. I think everybody loves Escher, right? Okay. I'm thinking within these limits. One of them is our favorite, a scientific non-Aristotelian basis for clear understanding of differences between symbols, in my case, images, and reality, which is the thing you're drawing the picture of, right? Like all these people here are no longer real, but those pictures are still real. And that one, the pictures themselves can influence and limit human ability to think. Thank you, Willie Martins. And then I like this idea of time binding, that you can transmit ideas from generation to generation, and also that they're rooted in the place that they come from. And thanks to Ari Ben-Menon for that. So the House of Meliagara has this picture on the wall. I instead of making a lot of windows, Romans made a lot of really pretty wall paintings, and they were sort of built into the wall themselves, so they're attached to the wall. The door and balconies don't follow single point perspective in here. So that door on this behind me, and then the 3 balconies that are here, all in different spaces. And I'm really curious about why the Romans like to do a visually variable perspective space, they can paint single point perspective, and they did it. It's right here on the right, upper top. Those ceiling coffers are correct single point perspective, but they've chosen not to. Why, right? And so just to illustrate a little bit better, in the red arrows, if you look at the top of the doorway right here and the bottom of the doorway, we're in two different places, okay? So the top of the doorway is sort of extending backwards into space, but the bottom of the doorway right here is flat to the picture plane, okay? So, and then the top of that pediment right there, that triangle thing, the top of the pediment is slid forward into the space that we occupy, and the back of it is attached to the wall in a very specific way. But the pillar that's supporting it on that side is facing neither of those directions. It doesn't make sense to the pediment. It doesn't make sense to the flat space either, right? And then her balcony is facing us, and that's in flat space, right? It has no depth whatsoever. And right, so the upstairs coffered ceiling on that at the yellow arrow, that's where we're talking about. And you know, I don't know, do they need something to do with their second eye, right? Most of the stuff that you see, like these paintings, are single point perspective, which means you're only using one eye. Photography is single point perspective, use one eye, right? Drawing, you have to use both of your eyes to do it. So there's always this extra layer of translation that's happening in the brain of the artist. Maybe they thought it was funny. I don't know. I'm curious. Okay. You guys probably all know what single point perspective is, but maybe we need a refresher. This is the School of Athens. It's in the Vatican by Raphael. Does anybody know this picture, seen it in person? Oh, I'm so glad I included it. Okay. All right, so the Vatican. Single point perspective has a vanishing point. All the architecture is pointing down to one place. So the ceiling coffers, the pillars, the floor tiles, all of them are going back into one place. And the place that they're going is Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle's is on the far side from me. He's in the blue. Aristotle's in blue. Plato's in pink. And this is all of the smart people who were in Athens that have influenced the way that we have thought for the last 2,300 years. And they're all from different time periods, which is really funny. They didn't all live at the same time together. This is from 1510. So this is how space should be organized according to Italians in 1510. This was commissioned by Pope Julius II, and it was approved by him. These messages that you find in these types of spaces, they are written out by a priest or a scholar, and the images are generated based on those things. So they will literally say, we need a picture of the Last Supper with these specific human beings in it, and it needs to be in this. The artist has to make that happen. So this is not directly out of the mind of Raphael. It's Pope Julius II saying, this is what I want. And literate guy, so he is approving this message that the painting and the architecture has to unify the world, not just that room, but the world, for God, the Pope, the faithful. And philosophy and faith and art have to go to the same location, and it has to be a correctly depicted terrain to reinforce the big message, right? There's only one God, there's one location, there's one point of view. That's it. That's all you get, right? And of course, that's all for the Renaissance, Pope Julius, 1500s. Okay, so just because Korzybski likes Aristotle, there's Aristotle. This is hiding. Okay, so the specific depiction is when Plato is arguing that our world is not the real world, with the actual world being a spiritual realm composed of abstract ideas. That is what Aristotle is saying, right? Which fits in with the Pope really well, because he's talking about something nobody can see, right? God. And just for fun, that's Euclid over there, the guy in the red, and he's got like this, compass, and he's making a drawing on the floor. And we're going to talk about Euclid in a couple of seconds. So the structure of this image is intentionally semantic. It's framing how you're allowed to think, but it's framing it using only pictures and nothing else, right? There's no words here. So my process, the picture that you saw before, I start with marbling paper, which is very wet and slimy and fun. So at this point, I'm defining what the color set should be. And we know that colors influence the way that people think about certain things. And we know that colors performing that influence change in every single culture that you're in, right? And so I can't speak for any other culture than mine when I'm working with color. And so every single picture starts with this choice of colors. And I like it because it permits random shape alignment, right? So nothing is worse for me than staring at a blank sheet of paper. It's terrible. But if I stare at a really filthy sheet of paper that has all kinds of mistakes on it already, it's great fun. I can do a lot with it. And what it does is present shapes for me to locate meaning, right? But none of this is happening in words. In fact, words are incredibly distracting to me. So if you see me drawing while you're talking, it's because I'm listening to you, but I can't look at the pictures on the screen or I'll get completely distracted from your train of thought. Okay. Not being rude. This is just what I do. People who understand ADD call that a self-soothing exercise, which is what's happening. Okay, so in my process, I start with staring at a piece of paper until I find something right there. There's a white dragon that I found. And then from there, I'll decide how I'm going to focus the image, right? And again, this is all pretty much before words. I'll draw that dragon out directly in black pen. I have to use a black pen. I don't want to erase. Erasure, which is image destruction, right? It happens when we feel that we've made a mistake. And if I did that every single time I thought I'd make a mistake, I would have a white sheet of paper. Or maybe it would be an erase de Kooning. I don't know. So the mistakes have to be developed. And for me, I do like a yes and approach that the theater people like to do, right? I accept your point of view and we're going to do blah, blah, blah. So, and I'll just work until it's done, and done is a funny word. I can't even go into that word. But this is a piece of paper that I started with before I made the picture that we're talking about, the Meliagara cycle. And what do you see? This is cloud staring, right? Anything that you see is correct. But they're very good. Mm-hmm. Lakes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's all in there, right? Because it's inside your brain. Yeah, it's cloud staring. If you like looking at cells on plates, it's, trying to decide what kind of cell that is. If you like looking at terrain from above, it can be lakes, right? When I'm doing it, I don't, well, actually I do. Okay, so when I'm doing it, I also turn the paper around because it looks different from different sides. So if I turn it around, maybe I'll see a profile of the nose, maybe I'll see a couple of giant eyes. Those kinds of things pop up for me a lot. So this is the place of how to focus the image. And remember, everything I'm telling you right now in words is me translating for you from a different language, okay? And one of the things that halts a lot of artists, remember, they want the art to speak for itself. One of the things that halts a lot of artists is we're really well trained in visual communication, but we're not as well trained in words, right? If you can find an artist that can write a really good art statement, that's gold, right? Like, for curators. I don't know why. So anyway, I have to let the image talk to me, right? Is how I would explain it. But I also, again, language is important depending on the kind of day I'm having. I might also say audition different ideas. I might say articulate the first big shape I see. I might decide how to focus the image. I might think about what I'm exploring today, right? So it could be other artists, it could be a location, animals, world building, whatever. I've been looking at Mézières lately, who's a French comic book artist. And so I think because I love art history and I have this huge Rolodex of images. I'm really good at art history in terms of remembering stuff. So I have this really big Rolodex of images and makes it really easy for me to find pictures when I need them. So thinking in pictures, I think in the pictures, I think in memories of pictures, pieces of memories of pictures to form and shape what I've decided I'm going to do, right? Letting it talk to me, the closest I can get to explaining this process to other people is the Gestalt idea of pattern recognition and closure, right? Which I think a lot of that's been written about in that journal. The words, this is how I can describe how I translate the pictures, shapes to the pictures. Words happen much, much later. Words happen when I have to talk about the picture to somebody else. And for me, talking about the picture is taking you on a guided tour of it, basically. I do this all the time. I do this when I'm looking at marble flooring, the marble that's got all the pretty like rocks, in it. Right? I do this on really moldy old painted walls that have like the paint scraped back on it, right? Stuff like that. Then from that idea, from that beginning, I'll draw the lines on the image and then I'll isolate the idea. But then I go on to a starter kit. I'll start imposing arbitrary rules and the rules will change. Okay. Color, physical locations, characters, repetitions. So the rules in this one are the space conventions of the House of Meliagara and Escher's cycle. So the space relations are Euclid's equilateral triangles. Colors are coded. Let's see, the colors are coded for stairs, right? For cubes. Okay, so this is Escher. When you guys look at this, you assume a unified single point perspective, but there is not actually one there. And that is why everybody's brain like kind of turns over sideways when they're looking at Escher, because we come from single point perspective in this culture. He's not doing it. Okay. But he's using signifiers of architecture. Signifiers of architecture are super important for us understanding spaces that we're walking through. So he's using stairs and window grills and floors and balcony railings. Those are literally signifiers for how you understand navigating space, okay? And you recognize that stuff instantly. And so you're going to assume that this space is correctly organized, and he doesn't do that. And that's why it's fun to look at, right? So he has 3 pattern logic systems that he's working with in this one image. One is the way that floor is up there is also those equilateral triangle squares. But he's shifted that so it looks like a floor. The stairs are a certain logic system. The balcony is, but there's another flat logic system here on the bottom that's totally different, right? And that's the flat logic system are these little figures here. I turned the picture upside down for you because the picture upside down is different, but it still functions as an Escher, which I think is fascinating. These blue lines and these red lines are parallel to each other, right? That's how far off Escher is from maintaining the geometry, the Euclidean geometry that should be here. This is where mathematicians screw up, right? Because they'll try to make these beautiful Euclidean hexagrams, these equilateral triangles, and they will never get here because he's messing with you, right? He's changed all of the angles so that it works for his picture, but those are the parallels. So this is me. I start with those hexagons, which, by the way, those things are incredibly hard to draw accurately. And then we're starting at the golden egg. If you go to the right, it's a room, but it's a room that doesn't make any sense. I stole that room from the Domus Aurea. There's that pediment down here. This is the pediment that you saw in the Meliagara picture. This is about one of the balconies in the Meliagara picture, right? There's another balcony down there from Meliagara. There is there's a blue lady in here that I unconsciously ripped off from Picasso. I just saw it yesterday. There's a dog up in the corner. There's stairs that are, if you've ever spent time in Rome, stairs make no sense. So I have not hazarded meaning here, right? Meaning is for the viewer. If I tell you what it means, you're going to file it away in your brain and you're going to walk away from the picture very fast because now you understand it. You got this, right? And that's what people do because we have to process all this information all the time. And so what you want to do is take half of something that you don't actually know and assign a meaning to it, usually with a word, and then you go away, right? If I tell you what it means, you're going to stop looking at my picture, and I don't want you to do that. So that's another issue about letting the art speak for itself. That's what people are trying to get you to do. By the way, have you seen the duck? I didn't make it, and I didn't make the duck. It's but does it change how you think about the picture? Maybe, I don't know, right? So letting the work speak for yourself. If I want my students to see it the way I see it, I have to translate the images into verbal language, and I stand there outlining stuff all the time. But the image is the Moe Pearl thing. There's the Barth stuff. We don't have time to go into it, which is totally fine. But the visual translation also among the students, they all see stuff differently in the pictures. So it's really, really important to crowdsource this stuff, really. Like Medea, she's holding a knife under her shoulder. Look at her, Medea's got her knife under her armpit, right? Like, did anybody see that? So yeah, that's where we're going there. The artists are visual speakers, but we're just talking in pictures. We're not talking in words. So think of it as you think of a foreign language, right? Different ideas are possible only in pictures. Thanks.